Hi everybody, my name is Lara Mani and I'm a research associate at the Centre for the Study of Existential Risk, CSER, at the University of Cambridge. And today I'm going to be presenting our paper that came out in August 2021 called Global Catastrophic Risk from Lower Magnitude Volcanic Eruptions with my colleagues Asaf Stakor at CSER and Paul Cole at the University of Plymouth. So as I say, it came out in Nature Communications as a comment piece, and it's very much a foundation stone for some work that we're hoping to continue working down. Before we go too far, I just want to kind of clarify what we mean by global catastrophic risk. So that's high impact, low probability events that might inflict damage to human welfare on a global scale, which is the definition that comes from Nick Bostrom. Otherwise, you might see it referred to as the loss, anything that might result in the loss of 10% of global population, or anything that's enough to dampen humanity's future potential. So it's not the total annihilation of humanity, it's a step back from that, and it's a kind of globally felt consequence from a high impact event. So I'm going to start this kind of narrative by just talking around the Icelandic eruption. I'm not going to attempt to say it, the VI4 eruption that forced the closure of airspace in 2010. As we know, thousands of passengers were disrupted around the world. So we had major disruption to global supply chains for perishable goods like foods and flowers, but also for just-in-time supply chains for things like mechanical parts for the car industry and other technology industries. This, despite its relatively moderate size of just a VI4, was one of the most expensive eruptions to date, causing $5 billion in loss to global economy. To put that in perspective, when we compare it to Mount Pinatubo in 1991, a VI6 eruptions, remembering that scale is logarithmic, that makes this eruption 100 times larger than the Icelandic eruption in 2010. And of course, the second largest eruption in the last century. It had this major eruption of ash and gas, these really famous images are shown there, but its economic impact was much more modest at just $374 million, and that's a figure recalculated for inflation today. And what we think this is showing is what we would refer to as VI-GCR asymmetry. We're seeing a shift in our societal relationships with eruptions, whereas large-scale eruptions might have caused global catastrophe previously, because we have a kind of more social reliance, societal reliance on a kind of aspects of vulnerability like global supply chains. We are seeing lower magnitude eruptions now intersecting and causing more chaos than previously. So what does that mean? So typically the dominant narrative is these large magnitude VI8 eruptions to cause the nuclear winter type scenario typified by the 1815 Tambor eruption. And borrowing from a colleague's paper governing boring apocalypses, they use the term existential hazards times vulnerability equals GCR. I've shortened that a little bit, of course, just to kind of explain here. But actually what we're saying is, why not consider an existential vulnerability rather than an existential hazard as constituting the element that might take us from a local to a global scale catastrophe? So what do we mean by societal vulnerability? And this is where I talk about global critical systems. And so our societies are now dependent on a myriad of systems and networks that are needed to sustain their development. So the transportation of foods, fuels, commodities like precious metals, our transportation networks, the transportation of people, on all of these things that we need to sustain the way in which we live, which means we're incredibly vulnerable. So what do these look like? So they could be things like the global maritime shipping, which of course was made famous by the Ever Given March 2021 stranding in the Suez Canal. And this is the global shipping map that shows that we rely on several critical passages, the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, and the Straits of Malacca, where we have massive transportation of global goods around the world. Submarine cables is another one which we obviously use for communications, but also to support our financial markets, which again are a point of incredible vulnerability for us. So we have the systems. What is their interaction with volcanic hazards? And in the paper we present this event tree that kind of demonstrates the relationships between a variety of volcanic hazards and the critical systems. And of course, I'm sure you won't be able to read this, so you can refer to the paper for more detail, but it would be like, how can you possibly disrupt or transportate? What are the physical volcanic hazards that would then disrupt global transportation networks? Or what would happen? How could we damage critical infrastructure like power grids, desalination plants, pipelines? And kind of mapping out the pathways which might lead, kind of like catapult this from a kind of local scale to a globally felt phenomena. So in the paper, we also present 7 global pinch points, and pinch points in the paper we noticed were regions where we had a convergence of these global critical systems. So we had a high convergence of, for example, submarine cables, global shipping transportation, and population centers in proximity to volcanic regions. And we noticed that there were 7 that kind of stuck out at us. And they include the Pacific Northwest, North Atlantic, Taiwan with its chip plants, the TSMC chip plants, which are so crucial to the global tech trade. And of course, our reliance will only ever increase as we increase our reliance on artificial intelligence. One of those is the Straits of Malacca, and I'll go into a little bit of detail there. So the Straits of Malacca, a key shipping passage. It's one of the narrowest. It's 2.7 kilometers at its most narrowest. We've got Singapore at the southern peninsula of there, which is the second busiest port in the world. It's some of the busiest air transportation networks. But in terms of global shipping, it's crucial. It's 85,000 vessels a year transporting 40% of world trade. 60% of global fuel resources traverse the strait every year. And on top of that, we also have 14 submarine cables that pretty much connect Asia, India, Middle East, and Europe. So this is a highly critical kind of convergence of our global critical systems. And of course, in proximity, we have a whole string of volcanoes, which we know are incredibly active, just to demonstrate what this pinch point looks like in reality. So as I said, this is a really foundational stone for where we hope to be going from here, and kind of looking more into this relationship between our global societal vulnerabilities and volcanic hazards. But essentially, because we've prioritized efficiency over our resilience, by making these supply chains that support our societies, we've been able to manufacture a new global catastrophic risks around how lower magnitude eruptions could be able to cause severe disruption to our global critical systems. So, I mean, this is a scenario that's applicable to other geophysical hazards as well, including earthquakes and landslides. This is really us kind of waving the flag here and saying, hey, we should always be talking about vulnerability and global vulnerability in terms of our risk assessments for volcanic hazards too. But we've still got a long way to go, and kind of building on this and thinking about this kind of building from here. So I'll leave it there. So happy to take any questions. Thank you.